don't like looking at the ensembles, but
hang on, Joe. Hi, everybody. Just want to make sure everything's working right here. Can you guys hear me? There we go.
Just make sure everything's working right here.
That's a little bit of a delay. Okay, everybody. Good evening. It's Joe Cioffi here. I'm actually doing this from FiOS 1 News, and of course, you know that right now we're dealing with Hurricane Irma with top winds of 185 miles an hour, and it's moving on a course just north of west and heading for Antigua and Anguilla, and for Barbuda. These islands will be experiencing hurricane conditions. Weather conditions are already deteriorating. We have a Air Force reconnaissance aircraft that's actually flying through this right now, and I want to show you what the pressure is down to, because we've lost even more in terms of intensity. I'm sorry, in terms of the pressure. It's gotten stronger. Top winds are 185 miles an hour, and here's the latest reconnaissance report that's gone from 920 millibars to 917 millibars. There's the motion here, which is on a course slightly north of west, and the hurricane hunters are on their second pass-through. So this is a 3 millibar drop in the last hour or so. That is, there's probably going to be one more pass-through, but this is every bit of a Category 5 hurricane. It's one of the strongest hurricanes ever observed in the Atlantic. So let me just get this live stream going, and we will come back at the end and go over a few other things. So just stand by. All right, so let's take a look at one of the strongest hurricanes ever observed in terms of wind in the Atlantic Basin, and this is Hurricane Irma with top winds of 185 miles an hour. They've been flying reconnaissance aircrafts through this all day long, so the wind reports have been phenomenal, to say the least. And the track of the eye, which if you look on the visible satellite, you can almost look right down the eye column, is moving on a course, looks like still slightly north of due west. And if this continues, it won't be long before that center is going to pass somewhere close to Barbuda or Antigua, or perhaps in between those two islands, as it makes its way through the northern Leeward island chain and eventually over into the Virgin Islands. The slightly more northward component of motion, as much as that southerly component of motion was important back over the last couple of days, now it's the northerly component of motion that we're paying attention to, because if that shows up, it lessens the threat to the northern Virgin Islands and to Puerto Rico. It could ultimately even lessen the threat to areas west, like the Bahamas or Florida or Cuba or the North Shore of the Dominican Republic. There are still numerous solutions here, so we are basically watching, just watching to see how the hurricane behaves. And because we're dealing with a very intense system, I would just caution, this is where we have to kind of look higher up into the atmosphere to see what the steering currents are, because these stronger systems are very, very vertical. They go all the way up in the atmosphere, and they're going to be responding more to middle and high level winds rather than the lower level winds that the weaker systems do. That could be a reason why some of the models are doing what they're doing, but it's very hard to say for sure. So here's the wider view, and I just want to show you, because we have another tropical storm and a new tropical depression. So here's Irma right here, right in the middle. Here's Tropical Storm Jose with top winds of 45 miles an hour. It's a good 1,000 miles south and west of Irma, so it's not really having any impact, nor is Irma really having impact on it. And we also have a new tropical depression that has developed in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. You can see it here. We've been watching showers and thunderstorms increasing there all day long. And right here, just off the coast, we can definitely see a low-level circulation has developed. And the Hurricane Center says that this stands a fair chance of becoming a tropical storm in the next 24 hours. But I want you to notice, at least for those of you who might be concerned about southeast Texas, we and South Texas. Notice the clouds up in Oklahoma and North Texas are going northwest, southeast. That's that upper trough that's coming into play. And that's going to create northerly winds in the northwestern Gulf of Mexico. So this, I think, is going to wind up getting pinned down into the southwest Gulf for the next several days. It may actually drift west or even southwest over time. So that is, I don't think this is going to be a problem of a tropical system developing and then moving northward. That upper trough that is going to dictate much of what Irma does is also going to dictate what and this tropical system in the southwest Gulf does. And I think Jose is just going to wind up going west or west-northwest. So it's going to be eventually somewhat caught up in Irma's circulation, but that may not happen until Irma gets a little further down the road. But I'm not really going to spend too much time on the other two systems because Irma is the primary focus. We have the latest recon flight. We don't have a pressure. Oh, no, we do have a pressure, 920 millibars. So Irma continues to strengthen from pressure. It's dropped another 6 millibars in the last 3 hours, so it seems to be deepening at 2 millibars an hour. We already have a Category 5 hurricane from respect to wind. Now we have it with respect to the pressure criteria, and there's nothing to stop this from getting even stronger in the next several hours, unless it goes through another one of these eye wall replacement cycles. But the eye right here, this is the satellite that the wind barbs are laid over, and the strongest wind barbs on the scale, 137 knots or higher, and they're right here, right along the the southeast of the center and northwest of the center. That's where we have the strongest winds at the moment. And by the way, the purple on both sides, indicative of the hurricane force winds, which go well north and west. The field of winds here in this storm has really expanded considerably over the last few days. As we've seen these eye wall replacement cycles, every time we have one, the storm was able to get just a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. So it's become a rather large hurricane. Certainly it's larger than what it was. So here's the National Hurricane Center's forecast track, basically taking it. The Hurricane Center has opted for the track that is further south from the models, which is really where what we've seen happen throughout this entire event, that models have had to continually adjust west and south, straddling the north shore of Puerto Rico, passing just north of the Dominican Republic, touching the coast of Cuba, and then at this point, the Hurricane Center's forecast begins to make its right turn. And of course, you notice the range gets much wider as you go out through time. So this is Sunday afternoon. This is Saturday afternoon. And we feel fairly confident about the track in through the southeastern Bahamas. After that, it starts to get just a little bit fuzzy. But I'm kind of going with the idea of staying on a west-northwest track, at least until it gets to about 79 or 80 degrees west, right about in here. And it's at that point, I think that maybe that right turn should commence, at least from what I'm seeing at the moment. And here are the latest hurricane track model, the hurricane track model guidance that takes it over the Leeward Islands, just north of Puerto Rico, just north of the Dominican Republic. Some of the models bring it onto Cuba, some don't. Looks like the majority of them keep it in the Florida Straits, and then the majority bring it up from north to south to Florida. Let's cut the state in half, and then along or just off the Florida coast. That seems to be where most of the models, the hurricane track models, which have actually done quite well with this so far, they're tightly clustered. That's where they seem to be. And then I think we have to consider if these tracks are correct, that we wind up with another the center moving back out over the water for a brief period, and then maybe going into coastal Georgia or possibly into South Carolina. So I'm going to show you the new GFS run, which offers a bit of a wrinkle here. And then we're going to show you the European run, which will give you the other extreme. So here's the track. And, you know, it seems to be like it's a little bit further to the north on this run. Then we get a jog to the west until it gets to the western Bahamas. And at this point, the GFS is orchestrating a northward turn straight north toward the South Carolina-North Carolina border. So this is a bit of a shift on this particular run. Again, I'll show you here. It makes the turn just to the east of 80 degrees west. So it would say on the new GFS run, and please do not use this run to make a conclusion in terms of absolutes, because just 6 hours ago, look at when it loads, look at the difference in position. 6 hours ago, the GFS took it right into southeastern Florida over Miami and then brought it back out into the open waters and into southern Georgia. Okay, and if we go back another run, go back to the run from overnight, when it loads, you'll see it. It was, everybody's getting on this thing at the same time. Okay, so it was about the same as the day run. We'll go back to last night's run, which I believe was further to the west. One of these runs was. Yeah, here it is. So this was last night's run. It actually took it, you know, just inland of the west coast, of, right over the Keys into southwesternmost Florida, and then straight north from there. So we're going to go back and forth on the western edge of these, the western edge of the model views, and then at times we're going to shift over to the eastern side. And of course, as we go through time, the variations are going to get wider and wider. And by the way, you can see as we go through time, still has that northwest hook that it wants to do. But if it were to take something a little further north, that would have some impact to areas further north on the coast. And by the way, we can certainly say at least through Monday, there are no issues here, regardless of which track it takes. There are no issues here in the New York, New Jersey, Long Island area. I still believe that the greatest threat is going to be for Florida and for the southeast coast of the United States. Now, I want to show you the European model run from today, and I'll punch that up. And let me get the surface here. I like to use the one with the pressure with the anomalies, the colors in blue and red. Okay, so here's the Europeans' idea, and we're going to find out soon enough whether the European is right or wrong, because it brings Irma through the heart of the Leeward Islands and is further south than the GFS. But I want you to notice, by the way, the pressure is 920 millibars on this hurricane. It is forecast on the European initial, and it was at 926. It was about 9:25, 9:30 at the initial time frame, which was 8 a.m. this morning. 962, right? Is that, yes, 962. So the European is 30 millibars off. So it has a weaker reflection of Irma, and it's going to be wrong here with 966. It might even be closer to 916. So the European with a weaker system reflection, that could be the reason why it's showing a much more westerly track. It takes it very close to Puerto Rico, very close to the North Shore of the Dominican Republic. It takes it right into into central Cuba before it brings it back out into the western Gulf, into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, and then moves it northward. So you see where the European has it, and here is the GFS by comparison. And I'll punch that up. So there's the European right there, and here's the GFS. And by the way, the GFS has an 895 pressure, so that would still be a Category 5, although I wonder if the numbers start to get a little suspect as we go into the longer range. So what is exactly happening in the upper air? And we're going to take a look at that. I'm actually going to go a little bit higher in the upper air. I'm going to look at, we usually look at the 500 millibar, but because this system is so strong, I think we need to look higher up. So I'll put up the U.S. region, which we have here. And so we're going to look at, I guess we'll have to look at the 250 millibar level, which is pretty high. Certainly higher than the 18,000 foot level that we normally use. Okay, so what's happening on this run is it looks like the model turns Irma east faster because it's responding to the troughing, the weakness left by the trough in the east, which lifts out And then you can see there's troughing right in here, okay, from the Great Lakes on southward in the highest layers of the higher layers of the atmosphere, and it's with that Irma responds to by going north and then eventually northwestward into the Carolinas. So this is what the GFS is seeing at the moment. So perhaps it's suggesting that because it has a very, very powerful hurricane, where we're going to have to look at the mid and higher levels in order to get a better idea of the track, and it's going to respond to the upper air systems that are at those levels. That could be the reason why we see this track a little bit further to the east, and that the Europeans' track is a little bit further to the west. So we'll switch it off at this point, and I'll come back and we'll do a little chatting, and we'll see how, I'll try to answer some of your questions that you were putting up while this was going on. Again, I want to just emphasize in terms of risk for New Jersey, Long Island, southern New England, southeastern New York, down probably to Delmarva. At this point, I still think the risk is low. I think the risk is higher southward through North Carolina. Okay, so just a couple of points, and then I'm going to have to go because we got some severe weather running around here in my neck of the woods. Just real fast, this is actually both the European and the GFS model have had upgrades done over the last year, a couple of them, and this is the first time we're seeing how they handle tropical systems, and in some cases they've done okay, in other cases they have not done that well at all. So it's very hard to watch these models jump around from one position to the other. The European had that out to sea, then to the west, flip back and forth a couple of times. Now the GFS is doing something similar, and where it's got it, shifting further east in a couple of runs. I still think those hurricane the hurricane track model positions where they're kind of clustered together, that to me gives me the best sense of confidence, because they've done better than looking at the global models. And remember that all through this event so far with Irma, we've been shifting south and west, south and west, south and west. So I think if there's room for error, that we may have to continue to do that south and west shift. So I'm going to end it here tonight. Sorry to cut it short. We will come back. We'll do a live stream. I'm not going to do one at midnight tonight because I need to get to sleep. So we'll do a live stream tomorrow morning, probably around 11 o'clock. And then maybe again tomorrow evening around this time. All right, so everybody have a great evening, and we'll talk to you soon.